Hey everybody! Recently, Sony put out an update to their website, introducing a whole new page dedicated to Japanese RPGs, trying to disambiguate what they are, and I'm very curious to find out if our opinions, mine and Sony's, align on the matter, because as y'all know, JRPGs are kinda my jam, and I've weighed in a time or two on what I think my definition of the Japanese RPG is. And it's a little bit contentious because there are some people out there who think that any RPG made in Japan is a Japanese RPG. So like things like Dark Souls, and anything made in the United States, for instance, would be a Western RPG, like Final Fantasy IX, which was developed in Hawaii. Clearly, I think that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So my definition is that basically anything that is inspired by the Japanese RPGs that popularized the genre in Japan, that is, the games that take kind of turn-based mechanics and simplify them to work on a single controller to appeal to an audience that wasn't super familiar with computers at the time. That's basically the impetus of the Japanese style RPG, and then anything that was sort of done in that vein, in that style. And of course, there's also the action RPGs that followed soon after in the form of like Ys, for instance. And also real quick, in case you didn't hear about it, my SuperDerek hoodie is up for pre-sale right now, and it ends on the 22nd. You have a few days left and you can still get in on this drop before they are made and sent out to people. But anyways, moving along. So here's the page that Sony's put together for us, talking about what a Japanese RPG is. Here is the first part here. What does JRPG stand for? Okay, let's read this. JRPG stands for Japanese role-playing game. They are traditionally story-driven adventure games developed in Japan, featuring a group of predefined characters, that's very important, and journeying on a quest fraught with danger. Maybe, sure, sometimes, most often fraught with danger. Yeah, okay, so they said typically. Okay, so typical traits of the JRPG genre include turn-based combat, fantasy elements, especially magic, extensive characters and or squad customization, and character progression or leveling systems. All of that sounds pretty solid overall. They haven't really gone into the origins at all, and I guess that's probably not super necessary if you're just introducing this genre to a broader audience here. Are all JRPGs alike? Now this was a very interesting thing to bring up. I haven't read the rest of the paragraph yet, but I do remember back in the 2000s, a lot of RPGs got called out by various reviewers of the era for being turn-based RPGs, and basically all RPGs are the same. That was kind of a blight among reviewers back in the day. It did a huge disservice to an entire fan of an entire genre. But obviously they brought it up to disambiguate that, to help elucidate people who might be of a more primitive mindset here. Not at all. The JRPG has evolved significantly since its early days and is now encompasses a range of subgenres, including tactical RPGs, action RPGs, which absorb elements from other genres. The lines can be blurry, but this list is focused on more traditional titles within the genre. Sure, absorb elements from other genres. That is some truth there. However, I would say that, especially action RPGs, I don't know if those necessarily the action elements have been absorbed, depending on the type of action RPG. The action RPG kind of started a little bit earlier on with things like Hydlide, which I've got a video talking about, and Ys. Early days. It didn't take very long for people to try to incorporate action game mechanics, I guess, into the Japanese RPG style of games. So, very pretty cool. The lines can get pretty blurry, but this list focuses more on traditional titles within the genre. Yep, it definitely does get blurry when talking about what those lines are, and which is why I always try to include in my statements about, what is or isn't a JRPG, that a lot of it has to do with how it feels, and how it communicates, how well you can say, yeah, this is a JRPG, if it takes more time to say, yeah, this is a JRPG, but it does this and this and this and this differently. If it takes longer to just describe the game outright than to say it's a JRPG, but then it probably isn't under the purview of the JRPG flag, I think. So let's take a look at some of these others. We've got Ys. They're actually talking about Ys on here. That's pretty cool. Pretty cool to see some Falcom love going out there, some Nier Automata, and some Kingdom Hearts 3. Clearly, they're focusing a little bit more on the action RPG with this set of slides here. Are all RPGs made in Japan? You know, I talked about this pretty recently when talking about can Gaijin make RPGs? I'll link to that if you want to see that. Ooh, this is interesting. Not quite. Oh, Sony? Have you been taking some notes from me? Dark Souls, Nioh, and Dragon's Dogma, for instance, or for example, are hugely successful RPGs from Japanese studios. Very true. But they're not generally considered RPGs. Not generally. Okay, so that's kind of a safety way of saying some people are probably going to disagree. Those people are probably wrong. But anyways, likewise, there are games made outside of Japan that would be considered JRPGs. It's best to think of JRPGs as a genre with strong but not exclusive footing in Japanese culture. Yeah, and by Japanese culture here in this case, we're not talking about like, you know, do they eat sushi? Do they drink green tea? Does it take place in Japan? Like, not that kind of Japanese culture, but more of the Japanese culture surrounding emphasis, like I said before, of the group over the individual, for instance, is a very big cultural difference. It looks like they've chosen some Yakuza here down below to sort of emphasize that Japanese culture side of things, but I don't necessarily think that they mean the traditional Japanese culture being represented, but more of like a modern Japanese culture, and not like in the kind that just it wears on its sleeve, right? The kind that is in how people interact with one another and their values. Yeah, so let's go ahead and continue on a little bit further. But by the way, just gotta say, it's really cool to see Sony sticking to sort of a very similar vibe, I guess, that I do when it comes to talking about Japanese RPGs, talking about how the Western-made studios have made some really awesome RPGs, JRPGs over time. I gotta agree. I mean, we have some really awesome indie developers who've been making huge headway and kind of breaking down some of those barriers. Most recently, Chained Echoes, for instance, is definitely made by one dude, by the way, in a Western world. You know, I think he's from somewhere in Europe. I don't recall off the top of my head, but dude did a phenomenal job. And if you haven't tried Chained Echoes, check out my video talking about my time with it. It's very good. But also we've got other games like Something Classic, who made Shadows of Adam. We've got some really incredible games just around the corner. How could I possibly not talk about Undertale and Deltarune, you know, by Toby Fox, which obviously made huge waves. And I don't think I see too many people arguing that those aren't JRPGs, right? So it looks like we're all pretty much on the same page. It's pretty interesting to me at this point that Sony would choose to make a web page specifically to talk about the JRPG genre. Now, what purpose could they have for that? A lot of people are kind of speculating maybe this is a hint that maybe Sony is trying to maybe gear up some more interest in the JRPG genre, possibly, or maybe they're thinking about dipping their toes back into developing some really awesome RPGs. Like, for instance, they a long time ago helped with the kicking off of Dark Cloud, you know, back on the PlayStation 2 era, which I guess now, yeah, that's been a while ago. But they also worked on Legend of Dragoon. You know, these are some intellectual properties that they worked with that were really big impacts on me at the time. It would be nice to see them kind of getting back into the fray. Maybe some more Wild Arms, for instance, would be really awesome. But apparently, we don't really know a whole lot else about this point. So as always, hype responsibly, you know. And if you want to get a t-shirt that says hype responsibly, check out shop.superderekrpgs.com. And while you're at it, maybe consider getting a SuperDerek hoodie. Again, we've got a very limited time left before these orders close down for good. This is a super soft, super comfortable hoodie. It is inspired by EarthBound, has some really cool designs on the back and the side. It comes with 5 EarthBound-inspired Scratch-n-sniff stickers that are pretty rad as well and made by myself. So anyways, I hope that you'll check those out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.